Hello folks. Now, a couple of topics have cropped up, and topics do crop up in the world of YouTube and in the world of the car community. I have various different outputs to get opinions from people, whether it's comments on my YouTube channel or on a particular video, or maybe comments on the Ford Focus Mark 1 preservation groups, or any of the other groups that I run, like the CVT register for these cars, any MG Rover with a CVT transmission. All those groups are started, and every so often there is posts that actually capture my attention, and I think this is a subject worth touching on. The rear suspension on a Mark 1 Focus, the rear arms that somewhat corrode very badly, they snap, they could potentially dig into the road and cause, well, serious harm to you. Forget the car, it's about us, isn't it? It's about safety. Kids, yourself, whoever's in the car, and everybody else around you. And I think that's the main point of that video. And that cropped up as amongst a load of comments and posts over a number or a long period of time. The other subject is something that I completely forgot about, despite the fact that my channel has a very nice niche, and that is automatics. I am the only YouTuber where he can say that all my cars are automatics, which is quite a modern thing, because when I took my driving test in 2013, if you ever hinted at anybody, oh, I'm thinking of taking my driving lessons in an automatic, immediately you'd have been labelled as, is there something wrong with you? Are you disabled? Well, naturally, some people are disabled. They only have the use of one foot. The owner of this car, I think the second or third owner, was definitely disabled. And well, we're supposed to call them enabled these days. I don't know political correctness. And he had the only use, I suspect, of his left foot, not the right foot. He was only left-footed because there was some disabled pedal system, dual pedal system, where you have two gas pedals and a brake pedal. Obviously, in an automatic, you have the big brake pedal in the middle and the gas pedal on the right-hand side. But this car had that system, but it also had a pedal on the left-hand side where the clutch would normally be, and that was bent upwards. And when I pushed it down, the gas pedal on the right went up. So you could effectively use the car, if you're right-footed or left-footed, basically, to alternate. And somebody paid a lot of money for that, and I got rid of it. And I wanted gone because I just wanted to simplify the car at that stage. I wasn't modifying it at that stage, I just wanted it gone. And I regret getting rid of it because it was actually a nice feature about the history of this car, including these rubbish parking sensors, by the way, which will go because I've got rid of the pedals. I've got rid of the ridiculous reverse sensor system, just the sensors in the bumper that, well, I've got to keep them in there because there's just 4 holes in the back bumper. So naturally they have to stay where they are until the bumper is changed. But that's quite interesting. And that's generally the sort of person that would have bought an automatic before, well, it's hard to say really, the last 6 or 7 years, where there seems to have been a spike in automatics. Generally now, culturally, we buy automatics, we don't drive manuals, because there is a gear towards electric vehicles, and electric vehicles, realistically 95% of them are automatics. Everyone on the mainstream manufactured car market, the new car market today, are automatics. But as it's been proven with EV conversions for classic cars, you can mate a manual gearbox with an adapter plate to an EV motor, electric vehicle motor, but in a way that actually uses very little power. I think it's been done in 2CV electric car conversions, and there's a few classics like Minis that have had the same thing. You can go all EV, gearless, so automatic, or you can go on the way of manuals and try and keep the car feeling like it should in a 2CV, to have its gear lever in the correct place, for instance. But in general, it's a feature like the 2CV, you know, having the gear lever coming out of the dashboard and having that in unique gear change is quite important to some classic cars, but most people don't care about that. But because of that shift, therefore electric cars are very much automatic, and therefore people are asking the question, well, why do I need a manual gearbox? You don't. I think in general it's old-fashioned advice when people particularly my parents' generation. I know it's the same advice my parents gave me in 2013. Oh, you must get a manual license. And I suspect that's just old-fashioned advice that's passed down to them from their parents and their parents, and no one's really challenged the idea of, do you need one? And my recommendation is, if you're not sure, if you're a young person and you're not sure whether to go for a manual or automatic, you've got to consider what your needs actually are. But if you want to get into older cars and classics, I think a manual gearbox is very much recommended, because you are limiting yourself. However, as I've proven in my car history, actually, that's not quite the case. My Rover P6 was a 3-speed automatic, a 2200 SC automatic. I think there's about 60 or 70 of them. I got lucky. It was sold near to my parents, but I was very lucky. My first classic, and it was an automatic. It follows suit with me buying this. I bought this. I passed my test on a manual, but then I saw the condition of this, and I go on condition. I don't care what gearbox it is. And I thought, this could make me rather lazy. And my parents were like, why have you bought an automatic when you got a manual license? What's the point in that? The point was, for me, in getting a manual license, and this was very current about 10 years ago, even less than that, is that if you want to drive professionally, like a truck, delivery driver, or work in a profession that might require the use of a driving license, a manual driving license, of which actually I did require a manual driving license for my job some many years ago, and still can use it occasionally, then that suited me absolutely fine. But in today, I think if you wanted to work as a delivery driver, most vans are automatics. Sainsbury's, automatic vans. Amazon, automatic vans. If you can't drive a manual, there will be automatic vans. So it's not as if you're limited on your professionalism, your career choices, because you've got an automatic driving license. So even that's less relevant now. But I thought it was good advice to take up. And I originally wanted to drive on automatic only. I was literally going to drive automatics, and then I made a U-turn after one driving lesson. I drove a Ford Focus Mark III Power Shift for my first ever driving lesson, and I thought, this is too easy. I need to try harder here. So I did go for the manual license, but there are a lot of common misconceptions that are pretty wrong and old-fashioned, and I think we need to move beyond that. And this is what this channel is about. I challenge opinions, and my straight talking attitude says it otherwise. And there are some things that really do annoy me about people that comment on people that either can't drive manuals because they've made a choice to go automatic, or people who naturally drive automatics. And these are some of the comments that have been labelled at me a few times with this car particularly. I'm not quite sure why, because I actually had no negativity with this car. I've never had anybody say, don't you want a manual Ford Focus Mark 1? Because most of you will know I had an ST170 for a very short time. Unfortunately, I had it for such a short time, and I never thought I'd be doing YouTubing, so I never kept any pictures. And I was rather disappointed by that car, quite frankly. I find the gearbox quite annoying to use. But I would recommend a 5-speed manual Mark 1 Focus. They're the best to drive, as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the dynamics and the driving experience. But please don't knock the automatics. I love this car, and there have been a couple of people who've bought automatic versions of a Mark 1 Focus, and I'll tell you what, you're in the right company, because you cannot go wrong on this gearbox. They very rarely go wrong. These Mazda units are very, very strong. They were used for about 16 years, from the Fiesta Mark IV, the Focus Mark 1, the Mark II Focus, all the way to the end of Mark II production. I think the Fiesta Mark V, Mark VI, and the Mark VII used the same gearbox, until it was virtually replaced with the infamous Power Shift, which was nowhere near as reliable. And quite frankly, they should have kept this gearbox going for a little longer. But a 4-speed automatic is a bit long in the tooth in, well, early 2010s. I think it would have been a bit, yeah. It doesn't look good on paper, does it? And that's what it was about, selling cars and selling a product. And dual clutch automatics, DSG is probably the best one, but even DSGs have problems. But the first one that I was actually, the first comment that I was given, and I get this in a lot of places. Oh, so what car are you driving, Andrew? Oh, I've got a Ford Focus Mark 1 automatic. I've just bought a Rover 45 automatic. Oh, that's nice. Do you think about getting a manual? I'm sorry. I think that's rather obnoxious. I get that a lot. I've had that a lot down the years. Personally, from people who are either not interested in cars, who are into cars. It doesn't matter. You don't go up to somebody and say, "Oh, I've got a Ford Focus Mark 1 1.6. Oh, right then. Yeah, okay. Fancy getting a 1.8 then?" You know, nobody goes up to someone and says that. And I was just thinking, why? Just appreciate someone's choice, and having an automatic is a choice. It's not like I'm disabled, it's a choice. And even if it wasn't a choice and I could only drive automatics, I have to say, I haven't actually shown that I can drive a manual on this channel. Well, that's going to have to change. Otherwise, I might get accused of not being able to drive manuals. My manual driving skills are very poor, I can say. I've lost a lot of practice over the years because my driving style is naturally now more lazy, because I've only had automatics to drive, which is why Project Ruby was deliberately an automatic as well, because actually I found something quite interesting that triggered in my head. The first one really is, no other YouTuber concentrates on automatics. There are YouTubers that have had real positivity towards automatics and not like, oh, it's an automatic, boring. They're not boring. Honestly, have you driven a CVT? This isn't boring, and this is not boring. And anybody else who owns one of these and one of these as an automatic would not say that. The second one also is, oh, automatics are for lazy drivers. Well, yeah, it is a lazier, laid-back, relaxed and stress-free driving experience, but it's not lazy. You still have to concentrate when you're driving and use more good multitasking, hand-to-eye coordination to drive an automatic. Manual drivers who rarely or have never driven an automatic would probably say, this is too boring, there's not enough going on. And I can actually relate to that. Yes, in a manual, you do have that slight more connection to the car, and that's another one I'm going to come to. But people don't call people lazy just because of their choice. It is a choice, and I don't really see any evidence of, well, you can only call me lazy. I've got a full-time job, and I've got a YouTube channel in and amongst all my social life, and I'm trying to scram it all into my so-called life at the moment. So I don't think you could label that at me. So I wouldn't label any automatic driver as lazy. And also, people who only drive automatics because they didn't get a manual license, that's because they chose to. Some people medically and physically, as I've said, can't. So be very polite when you're thinking about saying, do you think you should go for a manual? I'd be very polite about that, because it can offend people and upset people. And I've been quite offended, and I'm not easy offended by that. So be very wary if you have that kind of mindset. Automatics, you know, they don't connect you to the car. Manual gearboxes are more direct. They give a massively more direct driving experience, don't they? Depends on the gearbox. I've driven an ST170, and I thought that was a really disappointing car to, I'm just coming in because of the rain. That was a really disappointing car to actually drive in terms of the gearbox. I didn't like it. I prefer to drive a 5-speed manual in a Mark 1. And I prefer the 4-speed automatic to an ST170 gearbox. I know some of you are laughing at that, but it's utterly true. For me, I actually enjoy this car. Maybe I was just driving a dog and that was my problem. Maybe someone could actually offer me an ST170 in good condition, and maybe I should take it on a drive and see if it was actually a shocking example, because I don't think it was that bad, but it wasn't the best example in the world. But, you know, each to their own. So it depends on the gearbox, doesn't it? If the gearbox is a lot better designed, a bit more reliable, a bit more direct, then there's nothing to go wrong. But in an automatic, the only difference is your left foot isn't doing anything, and your left arm isn't having to go from the gear lever to the steering wheel most of the time. So when people say it's not as you're not as connected to the car, I don't know what you're on about, because I feel just as connected with an automatic, and I feel actually more in tune with the driving experience rather than getting stressed because of stop-start traffic. So each to their own on that one. But everybody else has their own opinions on that, and whether you should try a little bit harder. There is a very big YouTuber who cannot stop moaning about people who only choose or cannot drive manual gearboxes. And he constantly goes on about how bad automatics are. And I'm thinking, you ain't got a clue. You literally, automatic gearboxes, do you know how complex they are? And the thought, the geekiness of some engineer, clever engineers, has come up with that absolutely complex design called a brain of an automatic gearbox, where all the fluid goes to different passages at any specific time. They are complicated and they are very, very good at what they do, very sophisticated. And for somebody to say that a gearbox with some cogs and a stick and some synchros is just naturally or just better driving experience and just rubbishes the automatic side is absolutely rubbish. I've got nothing against manual gearboxes, but when it comes to people rubbishing automatics, this is why I made this video. And it's really very simple. It's a choice, and it's a really good choice if you're not sure. Yeah, but they're not as fast as manuals, aren't they? Well, of course they're not going to be as fast as manuals. Automatics have an inbuilt inefficiency, and most of them, it's called an oil pump, a fluid pump, okay? We have an oil pump driven by the engine in this one and in this one, and that oil pump has to deliver all this fluid across the gearbox into the right place, to the right clutch at the right time. So therefore, it takes a bit of power. And that's where the power sapping comes from in this gearbox. And in this gearbox, it's a torque converter that saps the power. It's very clever. It's like a fluid coupling, but it actually multiplies torque. Very clever indeed. But this car is only fractionally half a second behind the manual version. This car is only 2 seconds behind the manual version. That's pretty damn good going, I think. So the other thing about the performance, well, what do you expect? It's an automatic. Nobody buys an automatic because it's quicker than the manual gearbox. I really don't like it when people say, oh, but it's not as quick. Well, what you're looking for, you're going to be Lewis Hamilton on the roads. Actually, that's one of the biggest things that are pet hates that I've seen, especially on the Ford Focus Mark 1 scene. Oh, I've just bought a Ford Focus Mark 1, 1.6 automatic. Anybody got any performance mods that I can do to make it quicker? Yeah, buy the manual version. You do not buy an automatic and then ask the question, how can I make it faster? Just buy the manual version. It's automatically faster. And that, for me, it sums up my opinion about automatic versus manual. It is a choice. There are pros and there are cons to each side. Automatics are sophisticated, stress-free, and are very much in tune with modern day traffic. And classic cars with an automatic gearbox, and I'm talking about classic cars, we're talking about any car with a carburetor, distributor, no ECUs. That is for me what a classic car is. A modern classic has an ECU. But then again, there's a lot of classic cars, you could say, that have a few bits like injection and ECUs in the 80s when they were brand new. But there's more classic to them than modern. I think we can all agree where there is a point. But there is a massive demand for automatics now. And this is one of the main reasons why I wanted to jump on the automatic bandwagon, because I'm constantly sick and tired of other YouTubers rubbishing automatics, and I don't think it's right for that to be the case, because there are some absolutely stonking cars with an automatic gearbox. Yes, there are many classic cars you cannot drive if you cannot drive a manual, but equally there are many classics with an automatic gearbox that people want and are looking after right this very moment, and Project Ruby, she's one of them. And I'd be safe to say if I move that car on tomorrow, I'll be able to find a good buyer for it, because automatics, despite knowing maybe the CVT isn't the strongest gearbox, it has a reputation for frailties, people are willing to try and look after them if it means that they get to drive a classic or older car, but in a stress-free, relaxed manner to the manual gearbox. And when it comes to Mark III Fiestas, I don't think the manual gearboxes were actually that good. So I think the CTX, which was very much promoted on the original sales brochures on the launch of the Mark III, In almost every spec, it was offered on every spec. They pushed that gearbox because Ford thought it was going to be the future. Turns out the buying public just weren't quite ready for the CVTs, but nevertheless the technology did caught on, and a lot of cars today have CVT gearboxes. So, really, that's my opinion. Very short episode. I wanted to get some things off my chest. Not the usual automatic versus manual argument, because there is no argument. It's a choice. It's not a comparison. Can't compare two things that are completely different, can we? But all I will say is that on this channel, I will continue the theme of automatics and actually find the flag for automatics, particularly automatic modern classics and an automatic classic car. And no doubt that my next car will also be an automatic, but that'll be in the far future because Ruby is staying with me for a bit. But we never know. Things might change. Anyway, I thought I'd put this here. You take care, guys. I will see you very soon.